Why am I on the wrong camera all of a sudden? Interesting. Well, hi, Tiffany. We're going to have a Bill moment right off the top because we are live. Welcome to CEO Zones. And I don't know why my camera switched there at the last second, but here we go. All right. Something to do between Microsoft and Google, I am positive. But welcome back to CEO Zones. We're the online community for CEOs that are a billion and larger. Today, I'm excited. We're going to dig into the topics of the CEO alignment moment with Tiffany Joy Greene. We're going to reduce your drag, increase your velocity, and protect your enterprise value. Tiffany's a dynamic leadership consultant, author, speaker, and the CEO founder of MPWRPeople. And it's and her background, you see how to spell it, MPWRPeople. And she is known for her results. She specializes in getting organizations to connect their purpose to their results. And today we're just going to jump right into the CEO moment. Welcome, Tiffany.
Well, thank you, Bill. That was a really warm introduction. And I got to say, let's not confuse the CEO moment with the, what did they call it? The old timers moments that sometimes I'm already experiencing.
Well, fair enough, Tiffany, because I'm a great grandpa and I somehow was on the wrong camera all of a sudden. So there you go.
What are you going to do? So yeah, let's talk about the CEO alignment moment, and we're going to just cut right in. Let's get to the juice, as I say. So a lot of times you wonder why things aren't happening the way you wanted to, that the performance isn't happening the way you wanted to. Therefore, if the performance isn't happening the way you wanted to go, the profit may be not going the way you wanted to. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with market disruption. It's because misalignment occurs at the top. So if you're seeing problems at the bottom, usually it's because the misalignment occurred at the very top. So long before you even hit the front line. So silent drag slows execution, it distorts strategy, and erodes value. So I'm going to give you some pointers today on how to avoid that. Hopefully that sounds excellent.
Especially as we're already halfway through the first month of the quarter. Holy smokes.
You know, I don't know about you, Bill, but I feel like ever since COVID, time sped up with COVID, and it has yet to slow down.
Well, that could be the reason, but yeah, it has yet to slow down. That is for sure.
I'm going to I'd like to just share with you and everybody. So the organization, Empower People, that I have founded, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I believe by talking about purpose-driven leadership, which drives momentum, right? Purpose drives performance, which drives profit. We are helping people. We're helping communities. So I just want to give people kind of an air of what the Empower People culture is, because if I'm going to be kind of touching on culture today, you should kind of know about the kind of culture that Empower People is trying to build. So at the beginning of every single event that Empower People does, we say an oath. So here it is. It's short. No worries. So the oath that we always say at the beginning of every event is, I, Tiffany Joy Greene. Now you say your own name, not mine, but I, Tiffany Joy Greene, do solemnly swear to accept a lifelong obligation to hone my superhero powers and apply those superhero powers to the good of the people I serve. I will promote and add to the ongoing success of Empower People, its members, and the people, organizations, and communities it serves. I will help prepare the next generation of superheroes. I am driven to be a positive change agent for those I serve and interact with. And we always follow it up with something you may already know, which is called superhero pose, where you put both hands on your hips, shoulders back, head up, look up into the distance, and that's superhero pose, and that's your daily dose of empowerment. Feel free to take it as often as you need it. Nobody says I'm dry, Bill. Nobody says I'm dry.
No, never are.
So when we talk about the, $1 billion scale, the hardest problems aren't usually what you find on the dashboard. We all like to look at the dashboard. We like to see what's going on. But usually a lot of the times the root of the problem isn't found on the dashboard. They usually show up in four things every CEO has actually felt, which is strategic distortion, decision latency, cultural drift, and execution inconsistency. So these aren't failures of intelligence, they're failures of alignment. So 85%, this is coming from Deloitte, not me. This is coming from a Deloitte HCT report. 85% of executives say being purpose-driven organization shapes their ability to transform. So you're going to hear me say this quite a few times. Purpose drives performance, which drives what? Profit. Okay. When purpose is clear throughout the organization and through all the systems, all the processes, it touches the operations on everything. Guess what? There's no room for interpretation. So the purpose fills in the gap. Interpretation is where the problem is, right? So if we talk about drag, right? Who here, I'm sure everybody who's watching with us or later on, everybody knows the infamous quote by Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And what builds culture? Purpose builds culture. Because if you're not using purpose as the foundation of your culture, somebody will build culture, but it's not intentional, right? Culture will be built regardless if you intend to drive it, it will be built. Do you want to build it with intention or not? So misalignment is a silent friction that multiplies across layers. So any friction that you have with an organization isn't isolated. It doesn't happen on an island. It starts bleeding across the entire organization. I don't know about you, but in any organization I've worked in, typically the word that's often used instead of misalignment or friction is you'll hear the word cancer because they equate it to like a health problem, right? So cancer becomes the problem, right? So every layer between you and the front line becomes a place where intent can distort, right? So that distortion is what becomes the drag in the organization. So drag causes what? It causes a loss in velocity. And a lost velocity becomes a loss in enterprise value. Say the word entrepreneurial a lot. So a loss in enterprise value. So the larger the organization, the more layers there are, the more ability for friction to pass through that organization. So, but oftentimes the CEO sees this as a symptom, right? But what is the source? So today we're going to talk about what the source of that drag and that friction is. So purpose equals precision. So purpose is this is a new, this may be, I shouldn't say it is. I don't know what everyone's perspective is today, but for a lot of people, I can say purpose should be the CEO's operating system. So if you're using Microsoft, that's great. But purpose is really your operating system for strategic cohesion. So purpose isn't a philosophy. I had a show on ESPN Richmond. I still do the show. It's just not on ESPN Richmond. And a lot of times I get asked the question, oh, that sounds like kumbaya. I'm like, it's not kumbaya stuff. Purpose is an operating system. It's not inspiration. This isn't a motivational TED Talk. It is precision. So purpose is the CEO's operating system. I can't say that enough. It keeps interpretation aligned from the C-suite to the front line. Purpose is the glue that holds everything together, okay? So when purpose is clear, cohesion tightens, okay? And when it's not, that's when distortion multiplies. So when purpose is clear, executives don't start debating what matters. You're not in the room going, well, this is what, when you have the purpose, we all know what matters, right? They execute against it. Precision expedites speed, and speed protects value. So when purpose isn't treated with precision, it behaves like a game of, you're going to be familiar with this because I think everybody, probably almost everybody, but it's a high percentage, has played the game of telephone, right? So the CEO starts with a message. By the time it passes through the executive team, regional leaders and frontline managers, the message oftentimes can change. Not because anyone is careless, but because interpretation creeps in at the handoff. If there's room for interpretation and that purpose isn't clear, and it's not a malicious thing. So if you've ever said something, you're like, why didn't they? It's because you weren't clear. So it's a natural human condition to make sense of something that doesn't make sense to them. And if you're saying a purpose is one thing, but your actions are speaking another thing, human condition is we're going to fill in that gap to make sense of that, which is I'm creating a narrative to make sense of that. And that's where the distortion starts occurring, right? Okay. So what started as a strategy now becomes a suggestion. And what started as values becomes as opinion. And what started as purpose becomes noise. So by the time it reaches the entire organization, people are no longer executing the CEO's intent. They're executing the best guess of it. Okay. So it's very much like the game of telephone. By the time you get to the last person, it doesn't sound anything at all as to what was initially said. So that's what actually kills alignment at scale. So again, purpose isn't meant to be inspirational. So here's the purpose to performance chain. Purpose creates the alignment. Alignment creates velocity. Velocity goes to outcomes. Outcomes connects to values. Value protection. So I'm going to share another stat, and this is crafted by the Purpose-Driven Companies Profit Report from 2024. They say purpose-driven companies saw a 31% increase in median pre-tax profit compared to 3% for companies with low purpose alignment. So purpose is actually the backbone of elite leadership. So purpose creates alignment. Alignment creates velocity, like I said. Velocity creates outcomes, and outcomes protect enterprise value. But purpose is the first link. And when it breaks, everything downstream breaks with it. Okay.
I'm with you. I'm looking at the clock and we're like at 12 minutes and I feel like I got a 45-minute fire hose already. So keep going. Take a deep breath and go for a while. Okay.
Okay. I've never been accused of saying I don't have a lot to say. So there's that. So 3 sources of drag. So we've talked about drag. Where does the chain break? How does the chain break, right? You got the interpretation problem, which I referenced in the telephone game, right? Competing commitments, cultural drift, right? That's where they fall. So misaligned interpretation means executives hearing the same words and walking away from the meeting with a completely different meaning. And in layman's terms, how that awfully shows up as a bunch of corporate speak that really means nothing to nobody.
Fair.
Okay. Competing commitments, silos optimizing for themselves instead of enterprise value. I don't know about you, but I think I've experienced that with every client or employer in my life, where you have one entity, but every department or office, however it's created, has a different purpose. So now you have competing commitments. Then cultural drift. So values, this is a big one, because when I talk about purpose and the purpose chain and purpose creating performance, which creates profit, yes, I'm talking about culture, and yes, I'm talking about the internal dynamic, but it also relates to external, right? Your clients, your customers, your shareholders, your communities, all of it. So if the values on your website are not reinforced by anything you're actually doing, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a big problem. And that might seem obvious, but I've encountered that a lot, because for a lot of organizations, what happened is now you have the internal, and they may not be aware, and that's where somebody like myself, who's a third party, can come in and get kind of clear through the weeds and see it. You have an internal purpose, but then you have an external purpose, and they're not aligned. So that's another friction point, right? That's another friction point that slows down velocity. So if your executives are not interpreting purpose the same way, everything downstream fragments, as I said. So where is intent being distorted? That's the question you have to ask. If you're wondering, am I operating in the most efficient, aligned way? Is our organization aligned across? You have to ask yourself the question, where is the intent being distorted? And according to a Gallup workplace report, leadership clarity and alignment account for 70% of the variance in team engagement. That's a pretty high.
Yeah.
So where is the intent being distorted within the organization? And well, that's kind of the focus of today's. I would also say it should be evaluated. Where is it also being distorted outside of the organization? Because a full evaluation should be happening internally and externally. But the point of today's topic is more internal. So if you can't answer that, misalignment is already costing you speed, trust, and value. Okay. So when you have shared interpretation, you have a unified execution, right? So that's cohesion. You want to have leadership cohesion. When you have shared interpretation, everybody's interpreting. All the leaders aren't walking away with a purpose, but they have a different interpretation. They all share the same interpretation. So McKinsey, through the power of purpose, they say companies with a strong sense of purpose are more likely to have high employee engagement and high performance. So your executives must interpret the purpose the same way you do. So if you ask your executive team, what is our purpose? And everybody's regurgitating the same line or two, bravo, who cares? We want to know that the interpretation of that is more important, right? How are you interpreting that? So if they don't, you don't have a leadership team, you have a coalition. And coalitions crumble under pressure, right? Aligned leaders accelerate the growth. So alignment starts at the top with the CEO. And if your executive shares your interpretation, you get unified execution. But if they don't, what do you experience? Political drift, because that's how you introduce politics into an organization. So communication clarity, that's the next lever that as a leader you must be focused on. So purpose must cascade without distortion. So every layer within your organization propels that purpose forward. It shouldn't be a deviation and it shouldn't stop it. It should move it forward. And here's the thing. If we understand what the purpose is and we all share that, have the same interpretation of the purpose, then we have understanding. If we have understanding, we have trust, right? It's very important. So if your purpose is clear at the top, but distorted by the time it gets to the front line, this strategy collapses under confusion. So purpose has to cascade cleanly without reinterpretation. How many times you're probably like, wow, I guess interpretation is highly important at this point. You would be right if you've deduced that from this top. So what you say must serve translation. That's why don't fall victim to corporate speak, because oftentimes the corporate speak is actually not very clear.
Yeah. I recall one of our strategic imperatives 4 or 5 years ago was one team, one voice, for that very reason. And that was our internal motto: one team, one voice. We all use the word the same way. We all get the normative behavior of what that meant. So you're singing to the choir, but keep going.
So then we have to have the other aspect of this is we have to have purpose anchored decisions, right? And oftentimes if decisions are being made reactively, lots of times, meaning like that knee-jerk reaction, that's a lot of times when a weakness occurs, because then it's a lot of times when a purpose-driven decision is not made, right? But if your purpose is always the filter to decision-making, the odds are better that you're making the right decision for the corporation. So according to Harvard Business Review, purpose provides clarity, guidance, and confidence in decision-making, right? Now, if I know what the purpose is, I know that I want to drive the purpose forward, I am no longer throwing the spaghetti noodle at the wall, hoping something sticks, and let's see if this works. You're not getting bogged down necessarily in the how and the task. You're really focusing on the purpose, right? And that makes it a lot easier to make decisions that may require you to pivot. So when purpose is the decision filter, everything aligns quickly. Executives stop asking, what do I think? And start asking, what aligns with the enterprise's purpose? The other beautiful part about having a purpose-driven business and purpose-driven leadership is you start operating outside of ego, because you're now operating outside of yourself and you're focusing on the collective, the enterprise itself. When you have that purpose, it provides great clarity and it causes you to step back from outside of yourself. Okay, so that's a great consequence of that.
I just heard Alexandria go, Bill.
Something tells me if we can see her right now, she's like, woo! No, okay.
Something tells me that. Yep.
So when you're making decisions that way, that's called scalable decision making, because you're making every single decision rooted in the same thing. It's your foundation, it's your framework. Again, it's your operating system, which makes it a lot more scalable, and that propels you forward faster. So I'm going to share a way to kind of do like a rapid diagnostic to determine if you have alignment or not. Before I do want to share another quote with you from Bain & Company, and this was from the article, The Power of Organizational Alignment. They said companies with strong organizational alignment grow revenue at a significantly faster rate. Yes, they talk about rates in that article. I've also seen some other, I've seen different rates. So it's not consistent amongst studies, but the one guarantee is significantly faster. And who doesn't want to see significantly faster? Okay. So here's the exercise prompt. Here we go. 4 steps.
You scared me at the word rapid.
Okay. Step 1, you want to write down your organization's purpose down. That's step 1, easy. And if you're struggling with that, there's an indicator where your problem might be. Okay, so that's step 1. And just, I have a whole other thing I could talk about with purpose, but clue. If you're finding yourself written a purpose and it's more than a sentence, you got to work on it. Your purpose needs to be in one succinct sentence, okay? So if you're writing your purpose and it's a paragraph, you got work to do. Step 2, write how you believe each executive would now define, aka interpret, the purpose. So this is a moment where you can sit down and reflect about conversations that you've had with your executives in the last couple of weeks, and think about that purpose statement, and think about, based on conversations that you just had with them over the course, we'll just say a week or two, how do you think they are now interpreting that purpose statement? Are you seeing alignment? Are you seeing, well, that was an interesting interpretation of the purpose? And then I have a worksheet that I sent to you, Bill.
You did. I did not print it out in color, but for those looking at your logo, it had those kind of colors. It's very eye appealing. It
is. It's motivational. It causes action. Bright colors like that inspires action. Okay. So on this, if you're interested, I don't know how you're going to disperse it or how you'll do it, but I'll just say for the time being, like, if you want it, I have it, Bill has it, we can get it to you. So on the worksheet, you have the CEO's purpose interpretation. You can fill it out right there. For the scope, this is where you list your executive team. I've given some example of what those executives do, like CFO, COO, CHRO, CMO, all the C's. And then you put in what their interpretation is next to their name. And then you describe what that gap is or what's different from your interpretation of the purpose statement. Okay. We're doing, again, this is you doing a quick, fast, rapid diagnostic. Okay. So after you do that, you're going to look at those gaps that you put in that chart, and you're going to go, okay, where are the gaps slowing execution? Is it strategy distortion? Is it decision latency? Is it cultural inconsistencies? Is it brand misalignment, employee confusion, customer trust erosion? Check all that apply, because it can be more than one. And then you're going to want to describe those real friction points, like get into a little bit more detail on there. And you could do that on the worksheet as well. So if the gap is closed, on the next thing on the worksheet is, if the gap is closed, what accelerates. So this is where you say, what is the outcome that will happen once we close this gap? That is where you answer that question.
Okay.
Okay. That is your quick diagnostic. I'm also going to say that it's an awesome tool, but to remove any kind of bias, great to bring in a third party to do it, because the third party is going to be able to evaluate it without any bias. They're just going to hear what they're going to hear. They're going to get the feedback, and they'll be able to tell you, because it's hard to remove biases. But this is a great, rapid, quick fire way to explore it. So if you find a red flag, right? So you find that there's some gaps and you're like, oh no, what do I do? You say, it's an opportunity, because I all know that everyone who's watching this going, red flag means opportunity. It's not doomsday, right? So every gap is a friction, and friction is drag, and we want to remove as much friction and drag as possible. Why? Because you have the best ROI if you do, right? You have the best performance, which means the best profit. So yeah, what is the area of opportunity? Let's remove the drag as much as possible. And I'm not even going to try to do a NASCAR analogy, because I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I feel like there's probably a good analogy in there somewhere.
Okay. Or a pit stop. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the leadership. So here's the CO advantage. Remember this. So precision.
Now, wait a minute.
Yep.
You live in Virginia and you're not a NASCAR fan.
Yeah, they're right in my backyard.
I didn't know that there was such a person down there where you live, especially. Wow.
Oh yeah, it's such a big deal. I even know the CEO of the NASCAR Raceway here, which is a big deal, female CEO of the NASCAR Raceway here in Richmond. But no. I'm also a Canadian as well as American, and I don't know hockey, so.
Okay.
I know Wayne Gretzky. That's a national requirement, but outside of that,
yeah. Okay. As you were, ma'am.
So the CO advantage means precision. Always remember, precision beats charisma. Charisma is great. Precision is more important. Alignment beats intention. So you can have all the best intentions in the world, but if it's not aligned, it falls apart. Velocity beats complexity, right? And purpose is the thing that gives you all three. So where are we on time? Scanning. So
you're good.
Okay, because there's three companies that I always like to talk about that arguably, because I'm sure somebody could be watching this and go, I don't know if I agree with that, but arguably are purpose-driven, and that prove that alignment can be successful. And those three would be Microsoft, Unilever, and Patagonia.
Okay.
So under Unilever's purpose-led brand strategy, brands with a clear social or environmental purpose have historically outpaced the rest of the portfolio. At one point, their purpose-led brands were growing 40% faster than non-purpose brands and delivered a majority portion of the company's growth. So they were able to internally compare and contrast. If we focus on purpose here and not as much here, what's the difference? Well, it was 40% faster growth. So having shared purpose can drive market performance and brand strength and growth. And you might be saying, well, aren't you talking external now? Mm-hmm. Yes. However, it also bodes well internally. And another topic of conversation is, while that may sound external, it always starts internal first. Okay. So if the employees understand what the purpose is, they can speak to it, they're the best ambassadors of it, the external will represent what's done internally as well. Okay. The other one is, like I said, Patagonia. Patagonia, when they've done, I can't tell you, I should know this, when they've done purpose-driven studies to see who's like the number one purpose-driven company, Patagonia usually, I don't even know. I don't want to say, I think they've been number one every time, but I can't say that because I'm not sure if I've seen every single report, but typically they're number one. And that's because
their founder gives away hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure their purpose goes global, whether he gets the products or not. So excellent. Yeah.
It is. And what's interesting, it's not just with Patagonia, it's not just lip service. So one of the things that I find really intriguing, and it's such a small thing, but it does so much, right? So they're in the business of environment, making the earth healthy, right? And about the environment. So every single employee, no matter what role they have, their title is environmental activist. So whether they are out on the plant floor cleaning, that's what they're doing. One of their most successful promotions that they held was one Christmas. They took out big ad campaigns and they told people, do not buy one of our winter coats this year. We want to keep, because if you buy a winter coat, your old coat's most likely going to end up in the landfill. So do not buy winter coats this year, which seems really counterproductive because that was what their top seller for Christmas. But they said, and it was in fine print, if you'd like us to do any kind of repairs to your existing coat, we can do that. That ended up being their most profitable year to date at that point by running that campaign, because their employees stood by that. They believed in it. They knew why they were doing it. It propelled that purpose forward. And then from an external standpoint, their loyal customers are like, wow, they're practicing what they preach. They're not just telling us this, they're actually doing it. So that made people want to buy more.
Excellent.
I love that example. So then Microsoft. So in a recent academic case study of Microsoft's transformational leadership, the current CEO really focuses on clarity and purpose and making sure that everything is rooted in that. So you could argue that, yes, Microsoft obviously operates with the Microsoft operating system, but I think you could also argue that they operate with a purpose operating system as well. So I don't know. Well, you probably do. So Microsoft, when you look at under former leadership, Microsoft was Microsoft's had to come a long way since Steve Jobs, right? And lots of, Ballmer? I'm sorry?
Steve Ballmer?
Yes. So with Steve, a lot of people think back to Steve Jobs and as a leader, what to learn from, what not to do, as well as what to do. Like, he's an interesting leader to learn from. He also talked about a lot of the things like missed opportunities while he was a leader, right? That he learned a little bit later on. The current CEO is actually doing a lot of those things that Steve Jobs learned later on, but wasn't actually full on able to implement. And that's made a big impact in Microsoft. And if you look at the ways that Microsoft is also supporting communities and whatnot, they're practicing what they're preaching. And for as much as I say this, because I've said this in mixed groups, people will say, oh, they're not so good. And they'll highlight something that maybe they did that wasn't so good. Companies are comprised of people, and there's no person perfect, so no company's perfect. So that doesn't mean any of these companies I'm talking about, whether it be Microsoft, Unilever, Patagonia, even Starbucks, although Starbucks has been removed off the purpose-driven business list. They used to own it, man. They used to be on there, not too far from Patagonia, but they're off now. They're off the list. None of them are perfect. They still, from time to time, and we are going to make the great thing about being a purpose-driven business, it decreases the odds of making poor decisions, but nobody's going to say it eliminates poor decisions, right? Right. But I think that's all I got for now. I think the main takeaway is, I don't know. What is the main takeaway, Bill? Let's see what you picked up.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things I don't know if it was a main takeaway, but one thing I expected you to say that you didn't, because I've talked to you before, naturally. Purpose-driven leaders are not driven by ego. Mm-hmm. I thought that was going to come out once or twice. Because you said that ego is rooted in fear, whereas purpose attracts others and builds trust. Yes. You said that, but you didn't lay it at the purpose-driven, non-ego-driven leaders' feet. So I'll leave that with you there. I was expecting you to come out with that, though. And I believe one of your books is over that's my left shoulder back there, if I'm looking at my screen right. So there you go. All right. So you talked about profit. Let's bring that down to a billion plus organization mindset. At what point do you see misalignment starting to cost money? And that could be as simple as immediately, but what's your higher level organizational answer to that?
So typically, I would say the first area where you're going to say, okay, misalignment is in the organization and it's costing us money is decisions are not being made effectively or timely. So you may not. The indicator of that is you're having more meetings. You have a meeting to have another meeting to have another meeting. So that's a really strong indicator right now that you're misaligned and you're bleeding money, because every meeting you have costs money. Right? So that's the first indicator. And also another indicator is a strong one. Like if you notice that your market share is going down, sales are slumping or plateauing, like a big difference. Also, when you have your employees are high employee churn, that's showing a misalignment. Now, some people will argue that you may be experiencing employee churn because maybe you're one of the companies that typically are on the low end of pay, and that makes sense for your company or whatnot. So they're leaving for, higher paying jobs, whatever. But that it could be true. But if you're having more churn, oftentimes that's a sign of misalignment and friction. And so there's a discontent with the employee because they're going, I don't know why management's doing what they're doing and I don't get it. And so they go look up for another job.
Right.
Right.
Usually they don't quit the company, they quit their boss, which gets back to alignment of their purpose as well. So, yeah, like Alexandria, she's probably getting ready to quit her boss if I don't quit doing what I'm doing. In any event, so another thought comes to mind around the CEO and how do they know if they're truly aligned or they're just kind of complying? They're just kind of like, I don't know, I think of a weight like this. They're just going, they don't know that they're tipping the wrong way. They don't know if they're really strong. They're just kind of in the middle, which is probably the worst place to be because now you have trouble identifying it. How do you know that?
So what I'm hearing you say is compliant. So you said the word compliant. So compliant, somebody is compliant versus somebody that is aligned with the purpose and working within the purpose, aligned with the organization. Compliance looks like they're nodding their head at everything. They can actually repeat things verbatim back to you, but it goes back to that interpretation thing again. If you said to them, explain, what does that mean to you? And they can't explain it in a way that is aligned with the intent, that's a strong indicator that they're not aligned, that they're just complying with whatever you're saying. That's where interpretation and meaning is so important.
Okay. All right. I get that. So another question that came to mind would be, what are the early warning signs that there's executive drift? And I have that on my mind because in my interacting with our members, they're already saying, okay, we put these plans together August, September, October. Everybody gave a Hail Mary. We had our big round table. We kicked off. And now we're already a couple weeks into show me the money, show me the culture change, show me the behavior change. And a board meeting's coming up in a couple weeks already. So what are those early warning signs where the executive can see that something's, you used the word on your video with Mike, something's becoming dangerous? Help me there. Yeah.
So what I would say is, again, the biggest indicator that drift is becoming apparent is if you're having meetings and more meetings than you should, right? Like you can't, or your meetings are overextending. Like if you are typically do, I don't know, I'll just make like a 20-minute weekly meeting, and now your 20-minute weekly meetings are now 2-hour meetings, that's a pretty strong indicator because that means you're not making decisions quickly, that you're not all aligned for the same purpose, because that tends to mean whether it's amiable arguing or not so amiable, that's a strong indicator that you're not all aligned for the same purpose. Also, if you are always constantly delayed for launches, If you're always trying to launch something and it's always significant, like delayed, that means there's a drift problem. So like you were saying, like if you were launching a new membership and you were supposed to launch that membership, I'm making up dates right now, Bill, but let's say you're supposed to launch that new membership January 1st and you haven't yet delayed it, that's a strong indicator that there's a drift somewhere. Something is misaligned. Because as long as you set up realistic goals, the only way that goal doesn't get reached is if there's drift.
I like it. So we're right at the 40-minute mark. Did you have anything else you'd like to add before we give out your contact information? We have a free CEO alignment worksheet for the people that signed up. You'll get that in an email. Tiffany's email I'll put up on the screen. Anything else you'd care to add today, Tiffany?
I would just say, literally, while I know I can be jovial and whatnot, purpose really is purpose is your operating system, and knowing it and being able to interpret it and speak it in a way that all people can understand it is extremely vital. And every decision from that you're making, whether it be the janitorial level all the way up to CFO level decisions, they need to be rooted in purpose, and everybody understands that the decision being made is rooted to that purpose, so it makes sense. And here's the other fun aspect of that is you're never going to get all the people to agree with you, but if ever all the people can understand the intent and how it's geared to drive that purpose forward, you diminish friction. It's the unifier.
So I got to know, does your husband drink a pot of coffee to keep up with you?
He actually does drink about a pot of coffee a day, too. Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why. Okay. So another question was, I know on LinkedIn you posted you have a webinar tomorrow. Could you tell the audience maybe they catch the replay fast enough they could register for tomorrow?
Absolutely. So tomorrow at 1:00 Eastern time, we have a 30-minute course. It's a shorter course, resetting without resolution fatigue. And the reason why I'm putting that course on is because it's the beginning of the year and leaders have new goals, new resolutions for their companies, for their teams, for their personal lives. And a lot of people are feeling fatigued already and they're feeling overwhelmed. And we're going to focus in on how to do it and what is reasonable. And if you follow me on any social media platform, the focus I'm focusing on right now, clear tip is we tend to set goals, but the best way to set a goal is to just have one clear decision. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in that mini course tomorrow at 1:00.
Excellent. I signed up and then I realized I had a conflict. So
oh, man.
I might get there, but
okay.
I emailed the other person and said, hey, could we bump this back? So we'll see how that goes. But
we'll be prepared for the same energy, Bill. Just be prepared for the same energy.
Every time I talk to you, I'm prepared for the same energy. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. Thank you for another series of CEO Zones, the live stream. It will be posted on our website and on LinkedIn and on YouTube so that people can see this replay. And you can click and share it yourself with your own audience if you like to. All righty. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Val.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.